Hi, everyone. I'm Quisha, and I'm presenting from Hong Kong. My research project is on the phenomenology of pregnancy and possibility. Since my project is still ongoing, I'll present an overview of what I've done so far. First, I want to define what phenomenology is. It is the philosophical study of phenomena or experience, the meanings and value things have in our lived experience as human beings. So for this project, I've basically studied the pregnancy experience's impacts on mothers, with a focus on the mother and the fetus's identities and their relationship. So why this project? My mom actually experienced 3 miscarriages herself before having me and my sister. So she would always tell us how much she has done for our successful births. I always thought that there were so many different possibilities during the pregnancy experience, and I was aware that my mom faced some unique ones herself. This was always at the back of my mind, and I never actively thought about it until Roe versus Wade was overturned. Made me think about my mom's experience, how if she didn't have the right to abort during those unsuccessful pregnancies, there could have been the possibility that I might not even exist today. After discussing this with my family, I went through some readings regarding this issue and began my project. Here are some images of the things I've read since this summer. I began with some related to Roe versus Wade on the rights to abortion, analyzing philosophers' opinions on when a fetus becomes a person, and therefore when is it moral to abort. Because of this, I learned about the identities of fetuses, which attracted me more. I connected this with the idea that mothers don't actually know their fetuses personally, nor do the fetuses have much depth to their identities. So how could the mother and the fetus have such a strong connection? With this question in mind, I read more on prenatal attachments, how different factors could affect those relationships. Here are some quotes from a reading that most interested me, by Iris Marion Young. It touches on how the pregnancy experience could have negative effects on the mother, such as her loss of a personal identity because of additional and unfamiliar physical movements from the fetus and external medical procedures. Essentially, the carrier becomes an object under those factors. When feeling movements inside of her, she could feel as though she is just a carrier for a new life rather than a unique person alone. Under medical procedures, her private matters become public, where she essentially shows those internal and personal movements to the external world. This reading made me think how during pregnancy, there is a loss of unity of relation, which I think is important for a mother to maintain control and subjectivity throughout her experience. I kept on building on this thought. How could mothers restore and restructure this loss of a coherent identity? Could they do this through independently and intimately expressing herself through the relationship with her fetus? It was just a hypothesis that prenatal attachments could serve as a means to ground the mother back into her personal identity and gain control again. However, as this relationship was so abstract and it would need evidential support, and especially since I personally haven't experienced this phenomenon myself, I felt that I had to conduct interviews to glean a better sense of this idea. I arranged interviews in Hong Kong, reached out to mothers with unique pregnancy experiences, asked them questions, and am currently in the stage of analyzing their responses. Here are some examples of questions I asked and the responses I collected. I'll let you read them for a moment. Here are some themes that show up, which also tie back to my readings. There is an obscure distinction of identities between the mother and the fetus. The mother's loss of control under external medical procedures is evident. There's the strengthening separate identity due to the fetus's individual movements and how her relationship is inevitable when she feels the fetus. Lastly, the idea that the pregnancy experience could have negative effects, such as the mother's loss of identity, in this case, her identity being forgotten at times, is also confirmed. On this last slide, I included quotes that provoked most thought. Even in the interview's responses, they confirmed the idea of a public fetus, where pregnancy, a supposedly private matter, is put out into the public, where expectations have great effects. Another idea is that the creation of a new identity inside of you simultaneously changes your own identity. Naturally, there will be more layers to yourself as well as the self inside of you. One overarching theme is the ability to love their children more than themselves, further enhancing this prenatal relationship after birth. These mothers became selfless because they literally had to care for another self during the pregnancy experience. However, when there were challenges, such as miscarriages, their relationship also weakened because, in a way, they put themselves first when they had to face personal health issues or mental blocks. There were many outstanding questions raised by the interviewees too. Some I included are highlighted in green. It adds to the wider context of the phenomenology of pregnancy. I think the fact that these interviewees from Hong Kong could corroborate Young's ideas, who's an American, shows how there are still many universally relatable characteristics during this personal experience. Overall, this project has been incredibly eye-opening. After analyzing all my responses, I hope to get to write to my paper and publish on online blogs, and hope to give a presentation too in Hong Kong to not only raise awareness on an often overlooked idea of the mother's experience with identities and relationships, or the lack thereof, but also just the philosophy of pregnancy in general, which is not also widespread. I'm really glad to be working on this project. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Quisha. Some questions, and audience more than welcome to shoot some questions in the Q&A. But Quisha, what do you feel like was the hardest part so far in your research process?
Definitely, since I personally haven't experienced pregnancy myself, and I felt that all the readings felt very sort of distant from my personal experience as a 17-year-old right now. It was something really hard for me to grasp as a young girl, and definitely helped a lot when I interviewed these grown mothers and adults.
What was the most unexpected thing you've learned thus far?
Something interesting that I learned from the interviews, I'd say, is, again, it corroborates my title, Phenomenology of Pregnancy and Possibility, like especially the possibility part, because there are so many different possibilities and choices. And the fact that every mother has the choice to make a decision for what their future will look like, I think that's the most unexpected and something that really surprised me.
And then lastly, what advice would you give to another student just starting research on this topic?
I think definitely delving into the reading with an open mind, because there's so much you can learn just by reading.
Love it. Thank you so much, Quisha.